This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns, and this week, I'm not here. I'm somewhere else. And thankfully, this episode is still coming to you on the day it's supposed to. We don't have a spoiler-free review of Path of Vengeance for you today, but what I do have is my good friend Chelsea, who also makes book-related Star Wars content on the internet. So we talk about that in this conversation I'm about to share with you. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you're having a good week. I'm having a great week, wherever I am, whatever I might be doing. Here's our chat.
My name is Chelsea Zukowski, and I am a freelance journalist, a journalism professor, and I consider myself a professional nerd, especially for Star Wars.
Professional nerd. I love that. I love it. It's hard because you're like, what do we call ourselves? I do not like the term content creator, content creation. I have a weird relationship with that phrase because like we do create content, and sometimes I will use that phrase just because it's the easiest one for people to understand, but it's so much more than just content. You know, it's like when someone is like, I'm a content creator, they're like, do Instagram? I mean, yes, but also other things too.
Yes, like I feel like I have multiple hats, but I'm wearing all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I do write, I also teach, but I also read. So and I review the book. So I write the book reviews, but I also, I guess, create content for them for social media. So I'm a content creator. And yeah, like content creator just feels like it doesn't have like enough, like, I don't know, authority or like professionalism behind it. You know, I feel like you think of a content creator or like an influencer.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying not to like have that reaction, especially with my students. Like I have students who just have like thousands of followers and they are influencers and like that's their job. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, stop trying to be influencers, kids. Because they're like, I mean, they probably make more money than I do. So I'm gonna sit here and like, you know, rain on their parade of influencing.
Right. So. Well, it's like, if you think about like specifically, like I'm thinking of like Instagram, Bookstagram, book things on Instagram. Like technically we are influencers in the fact that we literally use it partially to tell people about these books and tell them that they're good and that they should read them. So like in terms of the definition, yes, it just, you know, it has that negative connotation, but like I also try not to like, you know, you are what you are. And always like I want to like encourage people to like do the thing. Like if you want to be an influencer in the Star Wars space, go for it. Like whatever makes you happy. Like the last thing we need is more Star Wars fans that are not happy in the Star Wars fan community. Like if, you know, taking pictures of books makes you happy, do the thing. And also it's like, it's not competitive. Like everyone, you know, we're all here supporting each other. I love that you and I like do the same thing, but we're so supportive of each other because like, why would we not be? We need more of that, I feel like.
Right. I mean, there really is no like competitiveness on Instagram, at least from what I've experienced in kind of the Star Wars book community. Like we have like a group chat and we have like another group chat for like everybody who gets, you know, the advanced reader copies, like the ARCs. And everybody just is like, hey, like I'm posting this thing, or we have a kind of a themed post if you guys want to participate, you know, here's the hashtag, please share. And I'm like, this is so nice.
It is. It's
and
like
there's
that,
a lot of people in there. It's not
yeah,
like it's just like 4 of us.
right. Well, that's the whole point behind a community. An online community is like communities are supposed to support each other, and like you may be doing similar things, but like you're all individuals and you're all like the whole point. And my whole thing with Star Wars books and doing this stuff on the internet is celebrating that and celebrating that. Like if we are all here to celebrate the books, then that's what we're doing. And like no one's doing it better than anybody else. Sometimes I take really bad photos. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
And if you
Sometimes,
don't
yeah.
like my photos, just scroll away. Like, I mean, it's just like, okay, if you don't like this book, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can just not engage with it, I guess.
I don't know what it is. And like I don't usually respond, but I have one person who comments on my photos every once in a while, and they're like, I'm not sure about this photo. Or some variation of like,
What?
Is this photo cropped weird? And I'm like, do you have like it's just a picture of a book. I'm so glad that it's somewhat entertaining you. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's really interesting too is that I feel like one of the questions that I get asked a lot, other than what Star Wars book should I read first?
Yep.
Is how did you get into this? Or like how do I get into this? And how do I get to the point where I'm getting sent books to review and things like that? And I always try to be really open and honest. Especially me, and I think you as well. We have come from a different background. Like we didn't work, in insurance, and then, our kind of hobby was like Star Wars reading. I have been an entertainment journalist for like a decade.
Same.
So it kind of just makes sense for me to narrow it down to, okay, like Star Wars is my entire personality now.
Yeah.
So as a freelancer, I'm going to try to make this into my career and hopefully, make some money, or at least obviously get books and enjoy what I'm doing and be passionate about my work. So I always lead with that. But like you said, if you want to, do what I do what you do, or do, what you see other people on Bookstagram or BookTok doing, just start. There's no right or wrong way. Once you just start, then you can, it's trial and error. It's trial and error for everybody. Even for big names. I mean, Star Wars just launched a TikTok page a couple weeks ago. And granted, like, people are going to follow them. They're going to be good videos, but still their style and what they're posting is going to evolve. So it doesn't matter if your first few photos are not the greatest. Mine were not. Like I look back and I'm like, oh gosh, like I'm so glad I've just learned from that. It's not good lighting, but you just learn. You just got to do it.
I mean, I started my Instagram, was it almost 5 years ago? And like,
wow,
I was on vacation. I was bored and I was like, you know what would be fun is to just take pictures of Star Wars books and post them on the internet. And like, I didn't do it because I knew that you could do it all the time and get books and all these things. I was like, I just think it's cool. And I like, my collection was so much smaller. Again, not great lighting, didn't know what I was doing, but I'm like, this is like, I liked photography, but like, I didn't really have a lot of experience, but I was like, I want to try it. And like, the only way I got better was by like, I've taken probably at this point, thousands of photos. Like that's how you do it, is like, you follow other people, you look at what they're doing. So much of like creating is like seeing what other people are doing and like taking from that what you like about it and like making it your own and like doing your own thing. And it's like, it's hard to like be consistent with it and like keep doing it even when you feel like it's not worth it. But like, that's why you have to do it, because you really want to. Just because it's like, it makes you happy. Like I take photos every day because it's one of my favorite parts of the day. It makes me happy to like, set up this shot or move things around or do whatever I want to do, because it's a kind of creativity like I don't get to exercise in any other part of my day sometimes. And so you have to find like your reasons to do it if you want to. And yeah, no one starts out good. Nobody. No one knows what they're doing when they start, and you just have to do it and just figure it out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You really have to be passionate about something. And what I always say, and what I love too about specifically the visual heavy social media platforms is that there really is a community or a niche for everyone.
Yeah.
Like 3 years ago, when I started full-time freelancing, I never thought that there would be a specific community just for posting pictures of Star Wars books.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? That's so specific. There's no way there's that many people. No, there are thousands of people. And, essentially based on, like my followers, your followers, everybody else in the community, their followers, we following each other. It is a pretty large community.
Yeah.
And I think when I tell people that's what my Bookstagram page is, I have like my family will follow me and they're like, what? Like, okay, I guess you're doing good, taking these pictures of books, but they don't fully understand it. But then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, there's kind of money and exposure or whatever to be made, by doing this. And so
it's wild, like the journeys that we go on to get to where we are, because like I've been a journalist for a decade, but I didn't start out in entertainment at all. I was doing health science journalism, and the company that I worked for, the website that I did writing for, cut that section, and they were like, hey, we like you, we'll keep you, but you have to write entertainment now. And I was like, oh no, I don't. What do you mean? But it was because of that I eventually ended up in the Star Wars space. And now like that's not my full-time job, but like a lot of what I spend my day doing. And it started out because I wanted to, because it brought me joy to write about something that I knew about, and writing about Star Wars helped me exercise the skills I needed to refine to kind of do more entertainment, which was my job. But then I was like, but wait, I can like write about Star Wars and do Star Wars things, and like it can be part of my job. Didn't know that was a thing. I never would have guessed. Like me graduating from college, I'm like, I have my English degree, I'm going to do fine. Never thought that like Star Wars would be a thing that we could do all the time, but like people do it. And like, you don't have to do it for work. A lot of people just do it for fun. I think my work is fun, even though sometimes it is also work. But wow, here we are.
Yeah, here we are. It has been a wild journey for me. When I graduated college, I was very lucky to get just like entry-level part-time job at the local newspaper here that I had dreamed of working at since I was little. I was like, that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. And while I was there, it was very much like local news. It was listings, it was event stuff, nothing too groundbreaking.
Yeah.
I got more into features writing, like the department is like features. So it included some entertainment stuff. We at the time, before like a dozen rounds of layoffs, we used to have a movie critic, we had a TV critic, we had all these different things that were basically covering national entertainment and popular culture. It was fantastic, and that was really my entryway into, hey, I've always been a nerd, but you can actually like make being a nerd your job. So I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. And I remember, I want to say, I don't want to like say that I owe The Force Awakens everything when it comes to my my Star Wars nerdiness, because it really was my dad who, you know, took me to see the prequels, introduced me to Star Wars, like a lot of people's dads. It's just kind of a dad thing you do. And he still loves Star Wars. Definitely not as into it as I am. Yeah. He's like, I don't know what happened with you and why you're so into it now. And I'm like, it's your fault, but thank you.
My dad said the same thing to me. He's like, I don't know, like, how you took this thing I was a fan of and like made it your job. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know. I can't.
We just you gave us like this tiny little thing and we just ran with it.
Yep.
Like you had no idea. But I remember my first kind of Star Wars like news coverage was around when The Force Awakens was coming out, right? Like they had all that publicity. Mm-hmm. And one of my colleagues, one of my good friends, she was a huge Star Wars nerd. And I remember her telling me about how she had read every single expanded universe Legends book ever. And she's like, there's like 150. I'm like, oh my goodness. But she was really into it. So her and I, and maybe like a couple other people kind of teamed up at the paper, and we were the Star Wars like coverage team. So we wrote like these kind of like guides of like, and like prediction things. So the stuff basically that we do now at Dork Side of the Force is like what we were doing back then too. And I just remember being so excited that there's like a new Star Wars movie coming out. And I remember there was, what was it called? Like the midnight release of like new toys and like merch and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was it called? Was it Force Friday?
That sounds familiar.
It does sound familiar. It was something like that. But so ahead of The Force Awakens, they had the Force Friday, or the big midnight release of like new toys and clothing and like all this other stuff. So I took my boyfriend, now my husband, to Target. And I was like, we're going to be at Target, lining up at Target. The only thing I was able to buy was my hardcover copy of Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. And it is so funny to look back on this moment now, because at the time I was disappointed that all I got was a book.
Oh no.
I wanted a, one of the new, like the Black Series figures. I wanted one of the new like Funko Pops. I wanted a new shirt. No one was like fighting for the books, right? Like once we actually moved into the line and like got to the section where all the Force Awakens stuff was, there was like just books. And I was like, okay, well, I want to get something, so I will grab this. But thinking back, I'm like, Lost Stars is like my favorite Star Wars book ever. Like it's just so weird, so surreal looking back and thinking that I was like disappointed that like this book was the only thing I bought.
And look at you now.
Look at me now. I just like, I tell everyone to read Lost Stars every time they ask me, I'm new to Star Wars books, what should I read? And I'm like, Lost Stars.
Yep.
You're good.
Yep. It's like, it's my go-to because like, it is really like the perfect entry point for anyone. And like, I have not like, I know there are people out there who don't think it's the greatest book, but I'm like, most people are like, yes, Lost Stars. So that's my go-to also. I'm like, just, you really can't go wrong. It's original trilogy. It's Darth Vader is in it, sort of.
He's mentioned. Yeah. It's that book that obviously it's very different from Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, but it feels like the type of book where if you like Star Wars because you have watched the original trilogy, like the kind of basics of Star Wars, like there are Jedi, there are lightsabers, Darth Vader's there, and you kind of know it, like then you can get into that book.
Right. This is very good. I reread part of it recently to do our Lost Stars episode, and I'm like, wow, this really is a great book.
It's so good. I really want to reread it because I listened to it on audio as well as Dark Disciple. And those two books, I really want to go back and like read them and like do kind of like the annotating and like making little notes and stuff, because I just remember how much I loved both of them. And I'm like, I want to go back and mark all of the ways that I loved them.
You're so good with your annotations and your little notes and your stickies. It makes me so happy.
I am not good with the annotating yet. But I have gotten a lot better. Really since I feel like the first book I was really like, I need to have like sticky tabs next to me was it Shadow of the Sith? Maybe I have to look, and I'm kicking myself now. I wish I would have done it more for like the other High Republic books. But I think ever since Shadow of the Sith on, I've been making little guides of like where I'm gonna sticky tab in there, and it ends up making them look like really pretty.
It does. It really does.
So like for Battle Scars, I found these like really bright kind of like highlighter colors, and like now the side looks just like this beautiful rainbow of colors.
That's so cool. It's perfect for that book.
Yes. There's a lot of green tabs for Marin, obviously.
Yes, she deserves it.
Yes.
Other than the most frequently asked question of where do I start, are there any questions that like you get more often than you know what to do with? I'm trying to think of mine.
Definitely I want to get into Star Wars books. Where do I start? And usually I try to do like a follow-up question of like, do you have a favorite character? Do you have a favorite era? And then from there, they're like, oh yeah, this. I'm like, okay, beyond the you need to rate Lost Stars. If they're a little more specific in like, I get a lot of High Republic questions because I've been following it since it came out 2 years ago or over 2 years ago. And a lot of them are, do I have to read this before I read this? Or like, do I have to read the young adult books to get the story? Do I have to read the middle grade books to understand the story that's going on? And I feel like those questions are always pretty tough for me because my immediate reaction is yes, but I try to take a step back and understand that not everyone is like me, who like their job is to read Star Wars books and to provide opinions on them. But I don't know, like I want to say yes, but then I try to just be like, okay, real talk, you don't necessarily have to read these middle grade ones. However, you will be missing out on a really good story if you don't. I don't think I've ever said that anybody should skip the young adult books because those, to me, those are essential for the stories that are being told. Yeah,
a lot of High Republic is like, what's the reading order? Or can I, a lot of like when Path of Deceit came out for me, it was like, can I start with this book? Can I start with phase 2? Or what do I need to know from phase 1? And I'm like, it's hard with the High Republic sometimes because I'm like, there's so much of it. And like, it took me a while too to be like, yes, I want you to dive in and read all of it. But like, not everyone wants to do that.
Right.
And like, not everyone is like a fan of YA in general, which is totally valid. Like if you don't want to, I can't force you. I think you should. I will always be like, you don't have to, but I think you should, because like, I wish everyone could read every Star Wars book. I mean, not that I've read every single one. Maybe someday. There's too much. They come out too fast now.
They do. It's like a blessing and a curse.
It is.
I get so excited that I'm like, I finished Battle Scars, did my review, and I'm like, oh, that was so good. And I'm like, okay, I have this much time until Cataclysm comes out. And so I'm like, okay, oh, now I can get right into it. Like for the last 3 years, I've never felt like man, I really wish there was a Star Wars book I could read.
There's
That
always
is not something that I could say. So
no. Well, especially because like doing the books early just so we have the reviews or interviews or whatever it might be. It's like, yeah, I just wrapped up the other day all the Battlescar stuff. Everything is done. And then immediately it was like Cataclysm. And I'm like, oh, there's no break. There's no
yeah.
we got to move on to the next one now because April, May, I think there's one coming out. I have
Yeah, it's April
track of
and May. There's usually like a lull in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like June, we don't really have anything. But
Yeah.
July, we have the Inquisitor book
Mm-hmm.
by Delilah Dawson.
Yay.
Yeah.
And
So
then that's it until like supposedly October is oh man. Crimson. No.
yeah,
What is that book called? E.K.
Crimson Climb.
Johnson. Yes, that one.
Is it October?
It was like hinted that it might be October. It's not like
okay.
the release date's not
It
official
was like
yet, but
fall.
it's something like that. I mean, it's not like Star Wars TV where they're like it's in the fall and then it's January.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there have been delays and we're pretty much used to that by now because especially with comics, I don't follow comics as closely as I would like to, but like everything I always see on Twitter is like, there's another delay. And I'm like,
I really want to be more into the comics because I do enjoy them.
Mm-hmm.
But I have kind of whittled it down to just following the High Republic ones.
Yeah.
Because I even was like trying to keep up with the Darth Vader, this recent Darth Vader run because it's really good.
Yeah.
We get like Sabe back and I'm just like, this is amazing. But it's still going and there's like 30 some issues. I'm like, I can't keep I can't keep up. I just need to wait for like the trade paperbacks.
There's a lot of Star Wars comics coming out all the time, which is great. And I'm so happy for everyone involved. But it's like, I think now I'm like, oh, I could catch up on, I don't know. I don't know if I ever will. There's just
it definitely is hard to keep up with those. So
it is.
And I can't imagine, well, I guess I can imagine, but I try to understand like what it looks like from this other perspective of like, obviously, you and I reading Star Wars, keeping up with what's going on with Star Wars is a big part of our jobs. And we're kind of required in a way. I feel like I have that pressure on myself to like try to keep up with what's going on so I can share it with my community and my readers and audience and things like that. But I can see why people can get maybe not like turned off, but just kind of overwhelmed with they don't know where to start. And I think that's where that whole, I really, people are getting back into Star Wars because of The Mandalorian, or their kids are kind of getting more into Star Wars because of some of the animated shows or the Bad Batch coming out now and things like that. And it's like once they're like, I actually really like Star Wars and I revisited the movies and now I kind of want to like get more into like all this other content that's out there, the books and comics, like where do I start? And I'm like, how much time do you have?
Yeah, it's hard because you kind of have to, like you said, you have to have those follow-up questions. And it's like, people just want to know, like, give me a book. And I'm like, but I don't know you. Like, I don't want to give you a book that you're not gonna like, because, that can happen. And I'm like, favorite character. Sometimes I'm like, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? Because then maybe like a book semi-related to that can work for you. It's like, there at this point, there are so many Star Wars books and comics and related things that like not everyone is going to like everything, which is totally valid and it happens. And it's fine. You're no less of a fan for not liking a book. There are plenty of books that people don't like, and that's fine. But yeah, I'm like, I want to give you recommendations, but I don't want to like immediately turn you off to Star Wars books,
Hey, yeah, it's again, it's like it's a blessing and a curse. It's so great that there is so much that you can get into. There's so much you can enjoy, but there's also so much that you don't really know where to start, or don't really know where to continue, or don't know if you're going to like something.
Right.
And I think with Star Wars in particular, I sometimes will like kind of compare with my husband. He's the big Marvel nerd in the house,
Right.
and I'm the Star Wars nerd. And the two franchises, they can be compared in a way, but whereas Marvel is building off this kind of already established literature, all of the comics, and kind of doing reimaginings and kind of twists, different, fresh ideas on those stories and those characters. Star Wars is still kind of just building out this world, and you have hundreds of different people with different experiences and perspectives who are lending those to the creation of these stories. So you have things that are like almost opposite ends of the spectrum as The Mandalorian and Andor. Like those are two entirely different TV shows. But they're also not that far apart from each other on the timeline. It's not like one is like 50 years later or something.
Right.
So they're very different. And whereas you may get audiences who like both, like us, like I'm assuming you like both. And then you get people who, like my dad, kind of older fans, or, different types of fans, and they don't really like the style of Andor. And the same could be said for the books. There are, The Princess and the Scoundrel is so different than, like Darth Plagueis.
Right.
Like, or even the OG Princess Leia wedding of the courtship of Princess Leia. Like those are two very different books. And you may like one and you may hate the other.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. You still be a Star Wars fan.
Right. Exactly. So you and I it is in some ways our jobs to kind of read these books, review these books, and just overall kind of constantly consuming Star Wars content, because we both reviewed the TV side. Sometimes we talk about Star Wars in our writing, we do all these things, and like we are fans, but it is also part of what we do during the day, or what it might be. And a lot of fans are constantly consuming Star Wars and feel, they might feel burned out every once in a while, or they're like, it feels like too much. I'm going to go over here and not engage with Star Wars for a while, because they have the ability to kind of like step away from it. Whereas like, for the most part, we can take breaks, but only for so long, because at this point, Star Wars is kind of like, it's a constant thing. I'm not mad about it. I don't think there's such thing as too much Star Wars. I'm happy to, like, it's unreal that we're getting as much Star Wars as we are, and that we are experiencing this, and we are alive, and we're here. I think it's great. But it kind of never stops. And like, when you make it a huge part of your job, it can start to feel like a lot, because you kind of have to keep going. Have you dealt with that feeling? How do you, like, if you have these moments where Star Wars starts to kind of feel like too much, what do?
I think that I have managed to avoid the Star Wars burnout, especially since it's such a big part of my career, my job now, is because I mostly stick to one aspect of Star Wars content. So like books. And I will introduce, I've recently kind of introduced comics and kind of reviewing some of the comics, like from Dark Horse and things like that, into the mix. And there's been times where I'm like, oh gosh, like I didn't remember, I totally forgot that comic's coming out tomorrow, and now I have to, but with those, I never put the pressure on myself to, you need to have this read and done like by release day. I do put the pressure on myself when it comes to new Star Wars books, mainly because I have developed those relationships with like the publishers and publicists where I do get them early enough. If I don't get them early enough, I'm not going to, bend over backwards and, stay up all night to try to do it. But yeah, like I would say that I've definitely managed to avoid kind of that burnout so far with Star Wars stuff, because I've stuck to mostly books. Now, I have reviewed a few of the shows for Dork Side of the Force and for Winter is Coming. So right now I'm reviewing the episodes of The Mandalorian for Winter is Coming. I know you're doing it for Dork Side of the Force. And
look at us.
Yes. I did review The Bad Batch, the first season of The Bad Batch for Dork Side of the Force back in 2021, I think. Yes. So, and that was fun, but I do know that trying to do everything and trying to keep up with and be on top of and being kind of the voice of authority, the voice of news for everything is impossible, and it will burn yourself out very quickly doing that. So I found that just trying to keep up with the books is like a good level for me to be at. And when I feel like I can add a little more kind of comics coverage, or add some kind of Mandalorian type coverage or stories or things like that into the mix, then it's fine. But if there was a Star Wars show happening like every month, like for like months on, or every week for months on end, that would be way too much.
It would. Yeah, it's hard. I've pretty much now, like, I think what keeps me going is because creating things constantly in general it's hard. It's hard to, keep going, especially when it's not like your whole job. Like if you spent your whole day doing Instagram and that was your job, like I wish it's no. But if that's like all you did, you'd probably be okay. But like, a lot of these things we do on top of, everything else. Like we're doing this podcast right now. This is not my job. Like it's never going to be my job. This podcast it's going to be small forever. And maybe I like it that way. I don't know. But I really I've started because I used to work weekends, and pretty much it ended up being that I didn't have a day where I wasn't creating some kind of content. And that was bad. That was bad for me. Which is why at the end of last year, I kind of just put a pause on a lot of things because this is too much. I finally have my weekends back again. And I've really tried to stick to don't make anything on the weekends unless you really want to, giving myself that, at least those 2 days throughout the week to just take a break, not feel like I have to be online, not feel like I have to write something or take a photo, unless I want to, unless I'm feeling oh, this is going to bring me joy today, because that's the thing that really has kept me going all this time is yes, part of this is my job, or this is important that I'm doing this to promote this book or whatever it might be, but I'm doing it fundamentally because it makes me happy. That's the most important thing, I think. If you're not doing it because you like it or you want to, then it's really not sustainable, which is hard to explain to someone who's I want to do this all the time. And I'm but you can't always though, unless it's really the thing that you're just going to do all the time and you're fine with that.
Yeah, it's and you always get those kind of detractors and a little bit of a negativity when you complain a little bit about having to create so much and having to cover so much, because there's really so much happening, and it's not inherently bad that there's so much happening. It's really exciting. But I think there's a lot of people who don't take creatives as seriously as you should, as they should. And I think that's where it comes into like the influencer culture and the perceptions of influencers and the perceptions of social media and, you know, things like that. And I think my family will never fully understand that I literally get paid to like be online and to like watch and consume like nerdy stuff. They just don't get it, does not compute with them. They're supportive of me. They're like, fantastic, love it, love this for you, and glad that you're happy and that it's doing what you need, you know, you're doing what you want to do. But it is it's frequently that I see posts either on Instagram or in the Star Wars book nerds group that I'm in on Facebook, because of course I am. And even on TikTok, BookTok, creators who I don't necessarily know what their kind of day job is. I don't know if they're like me, where they're a big part of their job is creating content and things like that. Making posts, making videos about how they are no longer happy with this, you know, with this thing that used to be their hobby that made them happy, and feeling this pressure of having to constantly be online and having to constantly be keeping up with the trending sounds or the trending styles of videos or the trending like aesthetics of Instagram posts or reels and things like that. It always makes me sad because I don't ever want to get to that point, and I try really hard to not get to that point, but I understand how they get there, because I too, on the weekends, I very limit myself. You know, I will do my, you know, scheduled post on whatever Instagram or TikTok or something like that. Like I've already kind of shot some photos or, you know, recorded a video, and I do minimal work and I post it and say, here you go algorithm gods or whatever. Here's your meal for the day. But they're always in the back of my head of like, okay, well, I'm not participating in that like trend right now. Everybody's doing that right now. Do I need to do that? How do I do that so I can also be a part of that conversation? And that's really is how it turns into burnout, how you stop being happy with your creative outlet, which you're, you know, the point of the creative outlet is to, you know, mental health, and everybody should have some sort of creative outlet,
right?
Whether that's reading or actually creating content.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people who maybe consume this content, or like they're on Instagram and they follow influencers or things like that, you know, you don't really know, if you're not doing it, how hard it is. Because, you know, even if it is something that we love doing, it's not easy all the time. And it's especially not easy to always be doing it. And, you know, it's been a while since I've really gotten to a point where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, because I've found a better balance and things like that. But it's like, you have to, like, if it's the algorithm, it's like you have to post every day, or it's, you know, everyone on Twitter is talking about this book thing, I should jump in, I should give my opinion. It's like that feeling of it's sometimes that feeling of you're needing to stay relevant, or you're needing to stay in it to kind of even just know what's going on. But also it really is like, sometimes you do have to just keep up with it, because otherwise, like, you go 2 days without posting on Instagram and what happens? I don't know. It's been a while since I did that, but it's hard because, like, and also there's that feeling of like, oh, I can't post the same kind of photo every day, or I can't do 3 podcast episodes about this one book in a row, even though I might want to, or you know, it's the feeling like you have to keep, you have to make it a variety, or you have to do something different, or maybe you want to like not do the thing that everyone else is doing, or you want to do it differently, or you want to take something that someone has done and, you know, feel like, oh, I want to do it this way. And it's not easy, especially because most of the people who are doing the Instagram or the TikTok or whatever they're doing online, it's not their job. they're in school or their job is completely unrelated, or even my full-time job is not to be on social media. It's a different thing. It's a similar work, but like when I'm on Instagram, like that's my own time. That's my own thing that I have to do on top of everything else. And it, it's hard. It's not just, oh, I'm going to take a photo really quick and then it's over. Like it can be that, but sometimes it really is more than that. And yeah, like a lot of people just you don't see that. You see the photo. You don't see everything that goes into bringing that photo to life. Sometimes you take a photo. I take a photo like 5 times before I'm like happy with the one that I end up picking. And you don't see any of that. Unless you're the kind of person who like shows more of the behind the scenes things, which I don't. But yeah, it's like,
yeah, I try to sometimes, but
yeah, I used to do it more with stories and things like that. But again, it's like Instagram, for example, you have your basic feed, and that's where I do my photos. But then you also have like, let's do a reel or let's do a story or whatever. And I'm like, it's too much. And this is just one app. This is one app of like so many. But if you like doing it, you got to do it. But it's hard to be on the other side where you don't, like, you might create content sometimes, but it's not like something you do consistently. Like it's hard to remember that, especially because it's online or you're just following an account. It can be hard to remember that there's a person doing that, and that person may really enjoy doing the thing that they're doing. And like, if you're not happy with it or you don't like them complaining about it, like take a minute, remember a lot of effort went into getting them to where they are, to the point where you found them somehow and you're following them now. Like they didn't just like wake up one day and that was like that. It took 5 years, or it took many, many photos, or it took a lot of reading, a lot of book reviews. Like I was reviewing books before I was actually reviewing books. Like that's how a lot of people get started, is you read the book when it comes out, you share your thoughts, and part of it's luck, part of it's who you know, part of it's I that's what it was for me. But it's like sometimes people get to be the people who review the books first. And not everyone gets to do that. But the reason we get to is because like we just we put in the work to get that point. And it's hard to, because I'll always be encouraging, and that's all you want to be, is encouraging. And someone will ask, how do you get these copies in advance? The answer I always give is, I used to give the answer that I don't anymore, which is I worked really hard for it, which is the truth, but not the answer I like to give anymore. It's, you just review the books. That's how a lot of people get started, is they do. I always say, like, act like you have the job that you want. And sometimes that's how you get there.
Yeah, that's another question that I get a lot, especially within the kind of Star Wars book nerd community, like our little group chats and things like that, is, how do you contact this publisher for this, or how do you do this, and like how do I get there? And I feel like I have a similar answer every time, and I think it's an easy answer, but I'm like, I just want to be transparent in that I've been a professional journalist for 10 years. Yeah. So I kind of came into this knowing how to contact, public relations professionals. Right. And I also came into this already with some contacts. Yeah. So my journey to this is not going to be the same as someone else's who does not do any sort of journalistic, writing thing, but they want to be a, kind of a Star Wars content creator, or like cover Star Wars books. So I'm like, my journey was probably a little easier because I didn't have to really worry about my follower count and my engagement rate and stuff like that on social media, because my hook was, hey, I'm writing for this outlet. Right. I want to read the book first. That's literally how I got to where I am now. Was I contacted someone with Penguin Random House, and then someone with Disney Books, because I wanted to read Light of the Jedi and Into the Dark, and like the new the first High Republic books that came out, and they're like, And I'm like, I want to write a story. I'm a journalist. I want to write for them. And they're like, okay, cool. Here you go.
Yep.
You know, like that doesn't happen to everybody because it just doesn't.
Right. Like it, for those who like really don't understand the landscape, because how would you if you're not in it, which is like the reason people get books in advance is literally just to, you know, not just to read them and be able to be like, hey, I got the book early. It's because you're part of the promotion cycle. Like the reason they give it to you is because they understand that you have enough of an influence on your community, or you have a following, or you have people who are going to read things you write about this book. Like they want you to help promote the book. That's why you're doing it. So like a lot of people want to do that, and it's great that you want to do that, but it's also not like, oh, I just want the book early. Like it's a little bit more involved than that, because it is, you know, the further you get into it, it's like you're reading the book early, but you're also creating content around that book. Or like I'm doing a story on like, when does this book take place? Because I know, because I've read the book, because I got it 2 months ago. Or you know, if you get to the point where you have to read the book so that you can write questions to interview an author, there's a lot involved that is more than just I read the book. It makes it seem like that's all you do, but it's more than that. But it's good. But also there is a slight downside to it, which is sometimes you get the book early and you read it, but the book doesn't come out for a month, and you're like, oh no, I can't talk about it. What do I do? If there is a downside to that, that is it. Because sometimes I'm reading about Marin in Battle Scars, and I'm like, I cannot yell about this book.
Literally cannot.
I cannot do it. It will be bad if I do that. Don't break embargoes. I see people doing it. Don't do it. You're going to ruin it for the rest of us. Please do not.
Yeah, please do not.
When they say do not talk about the book, they literally mean do not. Like you can't talk around spoilers. Don't do it at all. Please don't do it.
Just write it in a journal or something. Yep. Don't put it on the internet.
Yeah, I literally I'll start like a note in my phone, and I'm like, okay, I can write this thought and I'll keep it for later. Because that's what you got to do. You know, coming into this, because our paths are a lot different from a lot of people, which is we came into creating things around Star Wars as fans, but also with journalism experience. That doesn't happen all the time. And there are a lot of great podcasters and others who may not be professional journalists, but they're very good at what they do. And that's amazing to me. Is like, if I didn't come into this with any training, I don't know how I would have done it. Which is great. And a lot of people will learn a lot just by doing. And it's great to be a fan of something and just like create things and learn things because you want to and you're a fan of this thing. I love that. But it is unique to be able to come into this and be like, I know how to interview because I had to learn to do that, or I do it for my job. Are there any other things about your background that really have helped you in this space, other than like getting the books or things like that? Like, is there anything from your background that you came in and you're like, I'm really glad I knew that?
I would say it's kind of twofold. One is kind of a simple, straightforward skill that I came in with. And another is a little more complex. But the first skill is being able to write. And I mean, being able to write, not like, oh, you can physically write something, but being able to write clearly and simply and effectively and creatively. So as a teacher of journalism, I teach writing and I teach that craft of writing. I'm still like always surprised by how underrated writing is as a skill. Like it's like the underdog, you know, of like, you would think as a journalist, like your foundational skill is writing. But that's not always the case, especially now in, you know, today's world of just social media and everything like that. You know, the skill of writing is, I wouldn't even say that it's like just not a priority, but I feel like people who are not great writers can still get by and who can really succeed and make a really decent living and being terrible at writing, being terrible at spelling. But I always put so much stock in being a good writer and practicing writing and reading other people's work and reading books. Doesn't matter if it's a Star Wars book, doesn't matter if it's nonfiction or fantasy or sci-fi or whatever. That's one of like the core things that I just try to impress on my students, is that if you want to be good at something, you need to consume the thing that you want to be good at. If you want to be an author, you obviously need to be reading books, because how else are you going to know what a book is? What a book reads like. If you want to be a news reporter, you need to be reading the news, watching the news. And the same thing with this. If you want to be a content creator and a successful content creator, look at the things that those successful content creators do really well. And how can you kind of emulate that? And that kind of leads me to the second skill that I think is just important overall, not just for content creation or like Star Wars content creation and journalism and things like that, is being media literate and like actively wanting to be media literate, wanting to have a steady diet of quality, authoritative like news and content and things like that, and like really supporting and promoting the people who do take time to make sure that their writing is good and spelled correctly, and it's original and it's thoughtful and it's clear, and also who take the time to ask questions and to include certain details and information in their content and things like that. So really, writing and media literacy, having a passion for both, and at least an understanding of what good writing is and why it's important, and also why media literacy is important.
Yeah, writing is definitely one of those things where everyone thinks they can do it, but it ends up being, it's a lot harder than you'd think. And it takes, like, nobody starts out a good writer. It takes years of reading, of practice, of having people read your things and tell you what you need to do better, and having to go back and do it again until you get better. And then you need to get better and better. And we're always learning still, and always that's one of the, I think, hardest things of being a writer, is still being edited and still being like, oh, like I thought this was good, but it still could have been better. It's a constant thing, which is hard for a lot of people to like take that criticism and be like, oh, it's because I could do better and I'm going to. Yeah, it's hard. Because
especially if you aren't sorry.
No,
it's especially hard for people who don't come from those, like the English background, the writing, not English as a language, but like just English majors, things like that, like writing and creative and art and things like that, because in their time in college, in their careers, they may not have had that feedback, like constructive feedback, except maybe from a professor. But it is so much different getting feedback from like your editor or from a peer even than getting it from like a teacher, or your parents. So having that early on, obviously when I first started out, my writing was not great, but I dedicated so much of my day as like as a part-time like news clerk, my first journalism job was literally reading every single story on the website because I'm reading them and I'm like, these are so good. Like, how do I get there? But I got there because I just kept reading, and I'm like, I now know what a good story sounds like and reads like, and finding stories that I couldn't look away from, like I could not put down, whether it was a book or just like a piece of journalism. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like I want to create stuff and write things that people like just don't want to put down because it's so good.
Yes. I'll never forget walking into my creative writing class. I think it must have been, I was a sophomore in high school, and I thought I was like the greatest writer. Like I had an English teacher and he was like, "You're a great writer." And I'm like, "Yeah, I got this." Walked into that class and we must have been reading things to the class, or he called on someone, and it was a senior, and she started reading this, whatever she'd written. And I was just sitting there like, it's so good. I'm a terrible writer. I don't know what I'm doing. And like, it was that kind of thing where I was like, I can be that good. And what it took was sitting in that class and having everything handed back to me with notes and suggestions and things like that. And like, I had to learn, and you have to learn the hard way, like just by doing. And the only way to do that is just to keep writing and keep, like, I learn the most as I'm doing things. And so that's sometimes, if that's how you learn, you got to do it. I know, because I edit so many writers and I manage so many writing teams, it's like the hardest thing to do sometimes is to get people to write things, because like the idea of writing is so much easier than actually the execution of writing the thing.
Yes.
But the only way to get better is you got to do it, and it's time consuming, and it's often research heavy, and you have to really put in the work. And people don't think writing takes that much time and that much work, but it does. You don't see, that's the hard thing, is you read something someone has written, you don't see everything that went into it. You just see the final product. You don't know. But as a writer, you have to like get used to the fact that it takes so much out of you to get to that final product. And some drafts go through revisions and revisions, and like, but that's how it works. And it's hard to get to that point, but you just have to keep going.
Yes, you really just, if it's something that you want to do,
Yeah,
and you enjoy doing it, even if sometimes you maybe don't enjoy doing it, like you just have to keep doing it. And even now, there are days where I sit down and I'm like, I have to write this, and I really don't want to. Not that I'm not passionate about the story or that I'm not excited about the story. I'm just like, the process of writing is so different and can just be such a slog.
Yeah.
and then I get distracted and I type a few sentences and I'm like, I have to get up and like walk around the house. And then I come back and sit down, or I have to throw my phone across the room, or else I'm just going to keep picking it up and Googling this over here and having my thesaurus up and just all these other things. And by the end of it, I have this final product and I'm like, I'm proud of this. I don't ever want to read it again, but I'm proud of this.
I will say, like, the feeling of, oh, this thing is done, it's published, it's out there, I never have to look at it again, is quite rewarding. If nothing else gets you from blank page to I published a thing, it is knowing that feeling is coming. You're getting there. You just have to finish the thing first, because I will tweet out some article I just wrote and I'm like, never again, never going to look at it again, but I'm happy that it's done.
Every time I like send, press send in the email of like, here's my draft. I'm like, oh,
yep.
I'm good. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yep. Let me know if I need to fix anything.
Yes.
Hopefully not.
And I'm like, whoo. And then like one less thing. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, is there anything, I don't know if I have an answer to this question, I'll think about it, but is there anything that Star Wars content creation has taught you? Like something that you did not come into this like knowing or being good at, and now you're like, oh, I never would have gotten a hang of this or learned this or known this if it weren't for what I'm doing now?
Well, besides all of the fun facts that I know about the Star Wars universe, I would say that, I don't know if it's something I like learned specifically, more like reaffirmed my belief in that social media isn't all bad.
Yeah.
I know that there's bad parts and like terrible parts. But I feel very lucky that I've had such a great experience on Instagram and TikTok,
Mm.
where I know that a lot of other people haven't. And I've even tried to kind of not post controversial things, but kind of like post things that I know that people are going to have opinions about.
Yeah.
And I still don't really get the comments that I expect. And I'm like, am I doing something wrong? Like, why am I asking for like mean comments?
Yeah.
But I honestly, I feel like I've just learned that while social media, like it's healthy to have, you know, limits on yourself for social media, and to not doom scroll, and to not just be constantly comparing yourself to other people on Instagram and TikTok, and just because, you know, and like the perils of kind of like consumerism and, you know, the influencing, you know, over influencing and things like that, is that I love that I have found these communities that I'm in now. I love seeing people's like edits set to like Taylor Swift music of like clips from the Clone Wars. I mean, like, to me, I'm like, that just brings me so much joy.
Yeah.
And people like doing like, you know, kind of dubs over these weird sounds, and they're like, this is Thrawn, you know, talking about Eli Vanto. And I'm like, yes, this is it. You know, it's you know, stuff like that. And I loved that when Star Wars joined TikTok, all of my like mutual like TikTok Star Wars girlies were like, oh no, Star Wars is gonna see my thirst videos. Star Wars is gonna see my videos. Oh gosh, sorry, that was Siri telling me she found something. Yeah, like they were like, oh no, Star Wars is gonna see all my videos thirsting after the clones, you know, like things like that, you know, or like blue aliens. And I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. I love this. I love that I can open up TikTok and see someone just making videos about Star Wars characters, and a lot of, you know, talking about how they're, you know, attractive, or you know, things like that. So you know, that just makes me happy.
I would love to say that I will make it over to TikTok at some point, but then you say things like that, and I'm like, I just don't know if it's for me. I will try it at some point. I just feel like I'm terrified that, number one, I'm going to get on Star Wars TikTok and just never leave. Like, I will just watch everything. But also, what always happens with me when I get a new social media thing is like, oh, I'm just going to consume. I'm just going to watch things, not participate. But then I always end up, this is what happened with Instagram. I always end up, I want to make things too, because I think it's fun. And then I'm like, oh, is TikTok just going to consume my life? No, probably not, but we'll see. I feel too old for it. I know we're like the same age, but I still feel too far away from there might be a space for me. I don't know.
Honestly, I feel too old for TikTok sometimes too, but then I remember that both my parents are on TikTok. They don't make any videos, but my mom loves to send me like cooking, like recipe videos and she tries them, and she's like, oh my gosh, I found this, and I'm like, it's a fantastic, mom. And my dad just follows a bunch of like farm animals because he has goats, so he just sends me videos of like baby goats. So I'm like, you know what, they're having fun, it's great for them. And sometimes what's really embarrassing is they do the parent thing. My dad and my mom have commented on my Star Wars like book videos, and I'm like, can you not? Thank you for the support, but can you not? But honestly, I don't even know why I decided to like, I'm gonna join TikTok. I think I had it for my previous job, like my previous like full-time job that I had, to try to like teach the reporters like how to use TikTok. And I'm like, I don't know why you're asking me to teach them, but okay. And then I rebranded, as the kids say, to a BookTok page. And what I like about TikTok, at least in on my account, is that I've had success with both Star Wars books and like non-Star Wars books, because obviously Star Wars is not the only thing I read.
Right.
I love fantasy books, sci-fi books, things like that, even in romance books as well. So I like that I can use my TikTok account to also talk about other types of books, whereas Instagram, I feel like I've built up that brand, that persona of mostly Star Wars books. Occasionally I'll post other stuff, but it never does as well, at least on Instagram. But I also feel like too that on TikTok, I guess as in Instagram too, in a way, TikTok is really what you make it. So I've been on there for so long, and I interact with certain types of content, and I post certain types of content. So now my feed and my For You page is 98%, books and Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
The other 2% is like a mix of, corgis, farm animals, and cooking, because, my parents sent me stuff.
Right.
So, I mean, I would encourage you to maybe try out TikTok, maybe, or at least maybe start out with just consuming some, like I could like you recommend some people who I really like their content, because they're not super like, okay, I'm going to put a camera in front of my face. Like, I'm not like that at all.
Yeah.
I still get uncomfortable recording TikToks that way. I'm much more comfortable doing kind of more the aesthetic videos where it's like the books. So, but on there recently, like I did a review of Jedi Battle Scars, and I mean, it's doing pretty well, and a lot of people like interacted with it, and like ask questions and comments and stuff, and so that always makes me feel good. It's like, okay, people are interested in that. But yeah, I mean, I like TikTok, but I do find myself being like, okay, I need to stop scrolling. I need to get off and go read the book.
It's always funny to me when, like, if I'll post about a different book somewhere, someone's like, you read books other than Star Wars? And I'm like, yes. Yes. I do. I'm not very picky with my books. I kind of read a lot of different things. It just happens to be that Star Wars is just the one that I have to be a little bit more urgent about reading. Like, my TBR right now is there's an entire stack of books on my desk right now that I haven't read, and I'm like, it's fine, because Star Wars is getting all the attention. We're all good. I don't know, maybe I'll just keep making terrible Instagram reels for the rest of my life. We'll see. They're not good, but like, it's, I'm learning. That's, I just started last year. We'll get better. I don't have a lot of time. It's fine. It takes hard.
Time with anything.
It does.
And trial and error.
Yeah. You have to figure out like how to do it, but then you have to figure out like what works and what works for you. So it's a whole process, and we're figuring it out. Wow. This has been so fun. We've been talking forever. Which I love this. You can be in a community of book reviewers or Bookstagram posters. What do we call ourselves? I don't know. You can be in this community and like still not get to like engage with the people who are in it alongside you as much as you can, which is one of many reasons I wanted to have you on for an episode like this, because we just got to chill, sit back, talk about what we spend a lot of our time doing and why we do it and how to do it. Before I let you kind of tell people where they can find you, any other advice that you have that you can think of for anyone out there who loves Star Wars books and is on the internet and wants to do what we do, which is combine those things and kind of make things about the thing that they love? Any final thoughts?
Well, beyond just starting somewhere, I would say, again, don't try to do it all.
Yeah.
And don't feel like you have to be on top of every new release, because I find some really successful content creators and posts and videos are talking about books that came out like years ago,
Yep.
but that person is just now discovering it. And it doesn't matter how long ago that book came out. It doesn't matter if it came out 20 years ago. It doesn't matter if, oh, well, we're talking about, Battle Scars just came out yesterday. And like, right, yesterday? Yeah. Yesterday, March 7th. And you and I, we've read the book. Our kind of content coverage is done for the most part. It's not like we're never going to talk about the book again. We are. But there are thousands of people who are just now reading this story.
Right.
And they're discovering the story, and they're discovering all the things that we've been screaming about for like the last month, and we can't talk about it. So like they're then going to keep going and talking about that book. Like books are, I don't know, forever, like the internet is forever, but like once a story's out there, it's published, it's out there for anybody. It doesn't really have an expiration date.
Yeah.
And that's it too with all Star Wars books. Like Star Wars books don't have an expiration date for talking about them. And like you shouldn't necessarily feel FOMO, fear of missing out over not being able to read the latest release on release day and then share your thoughts on Instagram or Twitter. It's okay. So I have to remind myself about that too, is that like, okay, like just because you didn't get this book in time, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can still post about it.
Yeah.
You can still write about it. It doesn't matter if it's been 2 weeks since it came out. People are still talking about it.
Exactly. I mean, some Star Wars books are decades old at this point, and people are still discovering them. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about being able to just like randomly recommend books to people, is people are still discovering a book that has been around forever and it's brand new to them, and it could be brand new to you, or you might see them posting about it and you can engage. There are always, like, no matter where you're at in your reading journey or anything like that, like there are always people who have just read that book, or they want to read that book, or they love that book. Like you're never going to be like alone in screaming out a book you like, because there is someone out there who feels the same way. Yeah, that's really good advice. It's hard because that's the nature of social media, is you want to be on trend. You want to be talking about the thing that everyone is talking about, but like it comes in cycles. Like I'll see someone randomly post about like, oh, I just read Rebel Rising. That's a great book. And I'm like, I haven't read it for 5 years, but I'm so happy for you. It's good.
Yeah. I think it kind of reminds me of what we were talking about, how the skill to have, going into this is like writing and sharing and having some sort of creative outlet. And I make the suggestion to my students all the time, especially to kind of build up their portfolios with like clips, is to have some sort of blog, whether that is using like a Medium account. I know you use Medium. I have a lot of students who use Medium as well, or even like a newsletter that I have, which I also use as a blog. That's mine, that I can review whatever I want. I can talk about whatever I want. I can cover any book I want on there because it's mine.
Yep.
So I found that having that as an outlet, and there's some of the pressures of social media are taken away with blog writing, with newsletter writing. Obviously there's different pressures that are added, but I feel like that's a really excellent way to get into that content creation space, especially if you're coming into it with a little more of a creative background, where you kind of have that, that you're good at writing, and you like writing and reading, but you're still kind of like, I don't know how all this social media stuff works, and things like that. So I found a lot of success with that, because that's where my core skills are, is writing. So
yeah, I love it. This has been so fun, and I'm so glad that we got to do this and talk about something that we love doing and that we'd love to see so many more people doing, because it's a big space and so many people can do it. Tell everyone listening where you would like to be found on the internet.
A few places. I'm kind of all over the place, but mainly, like I just said, my newsletter, the Space Wizards Book Club on Substack. And so that's my main place you can find me. But you can also follow me on Twitter at, what is my handle now? On Twitter at Chelsea Tatham, which is my maiden name. And Instagram is at, I'm going to butcher this. It's ad astra libri. It's Latin. Don't ask me.
I have wondered.
Yeah. TikTok is a little easier. It's just at Chelsea Z Reads. So I'm a bit of all over the place, but
Cool. Yeah, and you're also writing on Dork Side of the Force and other places, and you're just all over. If I'm sure that if anyone is listening to this and they already follow Star Wars book related things, that they have seen your things around. It's been great having you, and I'm so glad that you've been here, and we'll have to have you back to talk about, I don't know, TikTok again. I'll give you can come back after I've started doing the TikTok things and we can talk about that maybe.
That would be fantastic. This conversation has been so fun. I'm so glad we've gotten to do it, and it's been a long time coming, but I am happy to pop back in whenever you'll have me. Happy to talk about or to scream about any Star Wars book. Really.
Oh, you'll be back, don't worry. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network and is written, produced, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. Keep up with the show on Twitter at Star Wars Lit Pod. And find the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, we have a newsletter. It's free. You can also start your free Audible trial and get an audiobook with the link in the show notes. Thankful as always for your support. Even just listening to the show means the world to me. It really does. For more book reviews and Star Wars book celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.